Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. Today's tip of the day asks the question: suppose you received a medical bill for $315 and you were told by the healthcare billing office or the healthcare provider that you would only be responsible for 70. Why did this happen and what should you do? Okay, so let's talk about it. All right, so you went to your doctor's office for a service. Let's just say that you are a self pay patient in this case. There are self pay rates that are put in place for patients that do not have insurance. And what this means is that the provider will let you know that you can pay a flat rate for this particular service, and you would not be held liable for what the original total true charge would be for that service. So in this instance, the patient was billed $315. However, the patient paid the $70 in which they were told that would be their responsibility for this service. So they get the bill, and again, it's for $315. Okay, so luckily, the patient took the time to open the bill and say, hey, wait a minute. I paid for this service at the time of service, and two, I was told that the service would only be $70. Okay, so making that initial call to the provider office is very important, because at that time, then the provider can do a little bit, a little bit of research. It may be the direct contact to the provider office, just depending upon how large that practice is. You may have to go through the billing office customer service department. So this was actually a real live case that I actually had to handle. And what needs to happen is that the provider office needs to reach out. The provider's billing office need to reach out to the doctor's office to say the patient has contacted us. They have stated that they were told that their responsibility for this service would be $70. We are billing the patient for $315, okay? And if you add the $315 to the $70, that pretty much gives you an idea of what the total cost of that service would initially be, if the patient had insurance. But obviously, the doctor's office or the doctor provider agreed to give the patient a discount, for whatever reason. That may be their self-pay rate, or it may be just something that the provider negotiated with the patient. In either case, this particular case, this patient was a self-pay patient, and that simply again means that they do not have insurance. So a lot of times providers, when you don't have insurance, they're willing to work out an agreement with you where you will not have to pay for that total cost of that service. Okay, and so I'm reaching out to the provider's office. They did respond and say the patient is absolutely correct. We should only be billing the patient for $70, and the patient paid that at the time of service. So we need to adjust the balance off. Okay, and so when that response comes back to the billing office, then they need to do just that, what the provider office states. And then sometimes, a patient would wonder, well, I made this agreement up front, everything was in stone up front. Why am I getting this bill? And the reason why this happens sometimes is because the provider's office have to put in certain codes at the time of service when it is a self-pay actual charge, and when they are going to honor giving the patient the adjustment. Oftentimes that does not happen, and it can be for many reasons, okay? Because it's a cycle in which it goes through, and different people touch that account and where they have to code it to make sure that the patient is being billed correctly. And sometimes that does not happen. It ends up getting through the full revenue cycle, and that bill drops to the patient. Now, let's just say that the patient didn't, just pay the bill. that would be a disservice to the patient, because we did make an agreement with the patient, and we should honor that agreement, and we should have things in place that would catch those errors. And I'm gonna be frankly honest with you. That simply just not it doesn't happen all the time. Okay, and so it's very important for you as a patient to understand, anytime you get a medical bill, you need to read over it, okay, in its entirety. You need to make sure, what you're being charged for is truly your responsibility, all right? And sometimes you have to go back to the provider to say, hey, this is incorrect. And you have to do it. I mean, it's unfortunate, because we would think, going to the provider's office, when we make this arrangement, that they would seemingly make sure that everything is done correctly, but it doesn't happen. We're all human, and errors happen, and again, it could be many reasons why, but the bottom line, what I want you to take away from this is to make sure, anytime you get a bill from your healthcare provider, you may not have insurance, so you can't match it up with your EOB, but at any rate, make sure that you take the time to open that bill, read that bill, and just make sure that you're being billed correctly, okay? And that you don't have to reach out, because if you let it linger and you don't open it, and let's just say, oh, I know I paid that bill, it's, there's just probably a bill advising, what the services are. In this case, we were actually charging the patient for something that they did not owe, because of that agreement that they made in the doctor's office, all right? So just be sure, guys, to check those medical bills before you pay, okay? Typically, I would say EOB before you pay, explanation of benefits, but in this case, it's medical bill before you pay. Read it in its entirety, all right? This is Venus Senior, aka your patient account detective. I am dedicated to your understanding. Have a good day.